Imagine waking up to the gentle patter of rain on your roof, a sound so familiar and comforting that you almost ignore it. But within hours, that tranquil rhythm becomes a relentless roar. The water starts rising, creeping up the streets, seeping through doors and windows, until your entire community is swallowed by a flood. This was the terrifying reality faced by tens of thousands of Texans in July of the year 2025. What happened in the Texas Hill Country was not just another entry in the endless cycle of disaster headlines. It was a national tragedy, a wake-up call that exposed deep and dangerous flaws in America's approach to disaster preparedness and climate resilience. How did one of the wealthiest and most technologically advanced states in the nation end up so unprepared? And what does this moment of crisis reveal about broader systemic failures in the United States? To answer that, we need to journey back in time and explore the roots of this disaster, the warning signs that were ignored, and the lessons that must be learned before the next storm inevitably strikes. Let's rewind to the geography and history of the Texas Hill Country. This region, with its iconic rolling landscapes, oak-dotted hills, and the winding path of the Guadalupe River, has always been a place of breathtaking beauty and latent danger. Long before the events of July 2025, scientists, hydrologists, and local officials had warned that the Hill Country was a powder keg for flash floods. Its unique topography, steep inclines, and narrow river valleys, combined with the rapid runoff from heavy rains, means that water can rise with devastating speed. In fact, the region has seen deadly floods before. As far back as the late 19th century, local newspapers reported on sudden storms that took dozens of lives in mere hours. Despite this well-documented history, the sense of urgency never matched the scale of the risk. For decades, experts cautioned that the lack of a comprehensive early warning system, aging infrastructure, and population growth in flood-prone areas could spell disaster. But as with so many slow-burning threats, the warnings faded into the background noise of daily life. Local governments, faced with tight budgets and competing priorities, often deferred upgrades to flood defenses and communications networks. Meanwhile, developers built new subdivisions and resorts along creeks and riverbanks, lured by the natural beauty but sometimes blind to the danger beneath. When the sky finally opened in early July, the deluge was relentless. Meteorologists recorded rainfall totals that shattered previous records. Some communities saw as much precipitation in 24 hours as they typically receive in an entire season. The Guadalupe River, already swollen from weeks of above-average rainfall, surged over its banks with terrifying speed. In places like Kerr County, residents had only minutes to react as the water swept into neighborhoods, submerging homes, schools, and businesses. The human toll was staggering. In Kerr County alone, the confirmed death count climbed to 103, a heartbreaking figure made even more tragic by the loss of 36 children. Across the state, more than 170 people remained missing as of July 11th, their fates uncertain. Entire families were separated, and the anguish of not knowing whether loved ones had survived became a daily torment for thousands. Among those mourning were parents, siblings, friends, and neighbors. Each story a reminder of how quickly life can change. The devastation caught the attention of the entire nation. President Trump, accompanied by First Lady Melania Trump and a delegation of federal officials, visited the hardest-hit areas. Standing amid the wreckage, the president admitted, "I've never seen anything like it. I've seen a lot of bad ones." The words were echoed by Melania Trump, who addressed the nation. "My deepest sympathy to all of the parents who lost beautiful young souls." But grief soon gave way to anger and frustration. In the days following the flood, journalists and disaster experts began to piece together a troubling narrative. Kerr County, ground zero for much of the destruction, had previously been denied crucial funding to upgrade its flood warning system. Local officials, including Commissioner Jeff Holt, had repeatedly pleaded for repairs to non-working phone towers and the installation of more robust early alert infrastructure. Their requests were met with bureaucratic delays and budgetary excuses. As a result, when the floodwaters came, many residents had little or no warnings. Sirens remained silent, emergency texts failed to reach cell phones, and the window for safe evacuation was tragically short. This technology gap was not a random oversight. It reflected a broader issue across the United States, where disaster preparedness often falls victim to political gridlock, short-term thinking, and the not-in-my-backyard mentality. In Texas, the lack of modern warning systems was compounded by another vulnerability. The vast majority of households did not carry flood insurance. Many families assumed, mistakenly, that because they did not live in a designated flood zone, they were safe. Others balked at the rising cost of premiums or faced confusing paperwork. When the water receded, these families found themselves not only emotionally shattered, but also financially ruined. Homes destroyed, cars swept away, savings wiped out, with little hope of government assistance covering the full losses. As the scale of destruction became apparent, a massive volunteer effort sprang into action. More than 12,000 people from across Texas and beyond joined search and rescue missions, distributed food and water, and helped clear debris. 19 states sent resources, including specialized rescue teams, medical supplies, and temporary housing units. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, allocated $13 billion in relief funds for Texas alone, a staggering sum that underscored both the magnitude of the crisis and the enormous cost of recovery in the face of inadequate preparation. Yet for many survivors, help felt too little, too late. Stories emerged of families huddling on rooftops for hours, waiting for rescue helicopters that could not reach them because of thick clouds or downed power lines. Local shelters overflowed, and the mental health toll, anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress became a new emergency. Texas set up a 24-hour crisis support line, but demand quickly exceeded capacity. In the weeks following the disaster, 5 additional counties, Burnett, San Saba, Tom Green, Travis, and Williamson, became eligible for disaster unemployment assistance, as thousands lost jobs, businesses, and livelihoods. The economic shockwaves rippled far beyond the immediate flood zone, affecting suppliers, schools, and even distant insurance markets. The political fallout was immediate and intense. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers clashed over the allocation of emergency funds and the question of responsibility. Should disaster management be primarily a federal, state, or local duty? Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem insisted federal emergency management should be state and locally led, arguing for a decentralized approach. Critics, however, pointed out that fragmented authority often leads to patchwork solutions and inconsistent standards. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee demanded documentation on the federal response, hinting at deeper partisan divisions and concerns about transparency. Meanwhile, President Trump himself wondered aloud, "After having seen this horrible event, I would imagine you'd put alarms up in some form." His remarks raised a simple but damning question. Why were these basic protections missing in the first place? To understand the answer, we need to look at the complex interplay of policy, technology, and social priorities in America's disaster infrastructure. Over the last 50 years, the United States has spent trillions of dollars on emergency response, but much less on prevention and resilience. The result is a system that often excels at heroic rescue efforts, but lags in the quieter, less visible work of risk reduction. Upgrading levees, maintaining communications networks, mapping floodplains, and enforcing building codes. In Texas, as in many other states, competing interests, developers, local governments, and budget hawks have sometimes prioritized short-term growth over long-term safety. The Texas floods of 2025 are not an isolated incident. They are part of a troubling pattern. In recent years, the United States has seen a sharp increase in the frequency and severity of extreme weather events. From hurricanes battering the Gulf Coast, to wildfires scorching California, to blizzards paralyzing the Midwest, the climate is shifting in ways that strain old systems and expose new vulnerabilities. Scientists warn that as global temperatures rise, the odds of catastrophic floods like those in the Hill Country will only increase. The ingredients, warmer air holding more moisture, erratic storm tracks, and heavier rainfall, are all consistent with climate change projections. Other regions across the country face similar risks. For example, the Midwest's aging levees and dams are overdue for upgrades, while the densely populated Northeast struggles with outdated drainage and sewer systems that can quickly become overwhelmed. In the Pacific Northwest, flash floods triggered by atmospheric rivers threaten both rural towns and major cities. If the systems in Texas failed so dramatically, could your community be next? The uncomfortable answer is yes, unless significant changes are made. So what can be done to prevent future disasters from becoming tragedies of this scale? Experts point to several urgent priorities. First, investment in early warning systems is critical. Advances in technology now make it possible to deploy networks of sensors, weather radars, and artificial intelligence-driven prediction models that can give residents precious minutes or even hours of advance notice. In countries like Japan, where earthquake and tsunami warning systems are commonplace, these tools have saved thousands of lives. The United States has the technical know-how, but so far, the political will and funding have lagged behind. Second, infrastructure must be modernized. This includes not only flood barriers and drainage channels, but also the backbone of communications, cell towers, fiber optic lines, and emergency broadcast networks. In Kerr County, much of the phone network was knocked out days before the flood, leaving entire neighborhoods cut off from evacuation alerts. Commissioner Jeff Holt put it bluntly, "We need repairs to non-working phone towers and a better early warning system." His words echo the frustrations of thousands of local officials across the nation, who often struggle to secure the funds needed for basic maintenance and upgrades. Third, insurance coverage must be expanded and simplified. The National Flood Insurance Program, established in the late 1960s, was designed to encourage homeowners to protect themselves from water-related disasters. But participation remains low, especially among those in so-called moderate-risk areas. Complex application processes, rising premiums, and the mistaken belief that floods happen only in coastal zones have left millions exposed. After the Texas floods, insurance claims soared, but many families discovered too late that their policies did not cover the full extent of their losses. Greater public education and streamlined enrollment could make a significant difference. Fourth, communities need to rethink land use and development. Building homes and businesses in floodplains may offer short-term economic benefits, but it also increases long-term exposure to risk. Some cities, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, have shown that it is possible to buy out vulnerable properties, restore wetlands, and create natural buffers that absorb floodwaters. These policies are not always politically popular, but they are proven to reduce both human suffering and long-term costs. The Texas experience has reignited debates in Austin and beyond about whether FEMA's $13 billion in reserves should be used for such proactive measures, and whether states must step up with their own resources. The consequences of inaction are stark. In the weeks after the flood, as 5 additional counties became eligible for disaster unemployment assistance and more than 12,000 volunteers converged on the region, the cracks in America's disaster readiness became impossible to ignore. What happens if the next storm is even bigger, or strikes a major city with even less warning? The domino effect could be catastrophic. Overwhelmed hospitals, crippled transportation networks, widespread displacement, and lasting economic damage. Yet, even amid the heartbreak, there are signs of hope and resilience. The flood has forced politicians, businesses, and ordinary citizens to re-examine what true preparedness looks like. Could better data, smarter infrastructure, and new technologies help save lives next time? Many experts believe so. Already, there is talk of using artificial intelligence to predict flash floods more accurately, deploying advanced satellite networks for real-time warnings, and integrating social media platforms into emergency communications. A handful of local tech startups in Texas quietly donated sensors and communication tools in the days after the disaster, helping to jumpstart a grassroots warning system. Sometimes, innovation emerges not from government, but from the community itself. The private sector is also stepping up. Major insurance companies are piloting new products designed to cover a wider range of disasters, while construction firms are experimenting with flood-resistant building materials. Universities are launching research centers focused on climate adaptation, and nonprofit groups are training volunteers in everything from first aid to drone-based search and rescue. These efforts, while still in their early stages, suggest that a new ecosystem of preparedness is beginning to form, one that could eventually bridge the gaps left by government inaction. So what does all of this mean for you, our viewer? First, knowledge is power. Ask yourself, does your community have an early warning system? Are you covered by insurance? Not just for floods, but for fires, hurricanes, or other disasters? Many Americans only discover the gaps when it is already too late. Now is the time to check, to push local officials for answers, and to prepare an emergency plan for your own family. Simple steps, like keeping a go bag, knowing evacuation routes, and signing up for local alerts, can make the difference between safety and tragedy. Second, the story of Texas is a lesson in the power of collective action. More than 12,000 volunteers showed up in the aftermath, neighbors helping neighbors, strangers risking their own safety to save lives. It is proof that when disaster hits, ordinary people can make an extraordinary difference. The hidden truth is that much of the most effective response in Texas came from the ground up. Local businesses donating supplies, churches opening their doors to the displaced, and citizen groups organizing search teams before official help arrived. In the end, it is communities that are the first and last line of defense. Third, We must ask the hard question: why were critical protections missing, and what stands in the way? The answer is both simple and stubborn. America's disaster readiness has lagged because of divided responsibilities, strained budgets, and a tendency to prepare for the last crisis, not the next one. There is a troubling pattern of disaster amnesia, a rush to rebuild after tragedy, but little sustained investment in prevention. Until these obstacles are confronted through investment, coordination, and political will, every state remains at risk. The Texas floods of July 2025 are not just a local tragedy. They are a warning shot for the entire nation. As climate change accelerates, the old certainties about weather, safety, and risk are crumbling. The next disaster could strike anywhere, at any time, with devastating force. But it is also a chance to turn crisis into opportunity, to learn, adapt, and demand better from those in charge. If you want to see how innovation, technology, and smart policy can make a real difference, not just in Texas, but in your own backyard, now is the time to act. Subscribe to our channel, leave a comment with your own experiences or ideas, and share this video with friends and family, because the next storm is coming, and together, we can be ready. The future of disaster preparedness will be written not just by politicians and experts, but by ordinary people who refuse to accept the status quo. Let's make sure that the lessons of Texas are not forgotten